Astrology is a guidance discipline to trigger understanding, communication from the brain of an astrologer. Vocational profiling is exquisitely important, helping others find themselves, the most important service astrology can give another human being. Contact is more important in this process than the nature of an aspect or a sign. We really must learn about diseases and their symptoms. We have to recognize the symbology of the planets as they come down to Earth within the aging process. It is not our job to provide the answers to our questions. It is our job to use the question to stimulate protective, potentially fulfilling conversations. The impression we get from the horoscope registers within us, in our sensorium, and people feel that. Make no mistake, a matured astrology led by your brain is very powerful indeed. And perhaps our mantra should be, I want to be a good astrologer. I am a good astrologer. Give me the opportunity, world, to be a good astrologer. Hello again. This DVD is devoted to the most important service astrology can provide to others, in my opinion. Vocational profiling. Oh my, it is so important. How many times has someone asked you, what do you do for a living? How many times have you asked someone else, what do you do for a living? The answer to that question is epic. It tells us so much. It tells us about the personal position within society. It tells us about income level. It tells us about specialized communication. It tells us about the home the person probably can afford. It tells us about how the person can indulge their children, model for them, for their futures. It tells us about educational background. It shows us potential growth, all in the answer of what do you do for a living? Very important. A second question that is very important is how many people do you know who are unhappy in their jobs, are in the wrong job? They'll often say that. How does this affect the rest of their life? How do they relate to their spouse, to their children, to themselves? Yes, vocational profiling is a service that is beyond estimate in its value to others. All of this really establishes what we have to call level in society. What you do for a living establishes level. There's no way to avoid this. I think we feel a tinge of snobism when we talk about level. Who are we to judge level? But level is judged for us by the behaviors that are reinforced in society, the evaluations that we must make in order to get along. It's a fascinating subject. It has intrigued me since the earliest days of my studies. And I saw we had a problem because astrology was not able to grasp a way to define vocational profiling. The old books say that if you were a Capricorn, you had to be a grave digger. If you were a Leo, you could be a king of a country. But those were grossly inadequate, of course. They were suggesting something, but they weren't suggesting the full deployment of personal resources, the needs that we've been talking about in this DVD series, that come to an application point in the job marketplace, where you go home fulfilled that you've done a good job with what you've got. You can be a manicurist, or you can be an elder statesman. You're fulfilling what you need to do if you're happy with your job. The key has got to be education. And you will learn after some extended practice with vocational profiling, you will learn to always check the significator of the 9th house. It's one of the first things that I look at when I pick up the horoscope. At the same time that I'm inspecting hemisphere emphasis, I'm also internalizing what I have learned to know about the 9th house. If that significator of the 9th house is under high developmental tension, the odds are extremely high in our society, really in the Western world from the edge of Europe west, that the education was somehow interrupted. Now that can take many forms. If it is interrupted, we have the train dangerously on the wrong track. What usually happens is there are financial difficulties, there are behavioral mysteries in the family's progress, neglect of the children. Dreams are not discussed and built up and projected into the future. The motivation to go on to further education is weak or indeed forbidden. How many times have I heard, well, my father didn't think I, as a woman, should have any more education. My job was to stay at home and have children. This is an old world view, but it's still very prevalent in our immediate pasts and in our present. We can't escape it. We have to come to grips with it at about age 18, 19, sometimes a little bit earlier. And so we keep in the back of our mind that the transits and solar arcs of that age period are vital to inspect. We can say to someone, well, when you were about 18, what was the discussion of going on to higher education? The answer is extraordinary. Well, I wanted to become an oboist in a symphony orchestra, but my father thought it was totally impractical and just wouldn't let me apply for a music scholarship. We didn't have the money, and so I didn't go. And you will see tears coming down the person's cheeks, remembering what could have been. Vocational profiling is exquisitely important. We live in a very, very difficult developmental embrace of what the parents think we should be. The parents plan for us in relation to their own needs, not ours. Their profession, their dreams, their traits are projected into us. It's unfair. It's confining. Flying here to Virginia Beach to make this DVD, 2 days ago, I was seated across from proud parents, a little older, having their first child. I knew it. And this baby had just been born. I mean, every movement was to gain balance in this world. Very well behaved. And I watched for 4 hours as the parents administered to this babe. And it was incredible how they were projecting into this baby behaviors they thought would calm it, put it straight in line with the next stage of development. I could go on and on with those observations, but they start even before we're born. We know it's going to be a boy. We know it's going to be a girl. And that girl could be a great cheerleader, or that boy can sometimes be president of his own company. Oh, I go on and on. We have the locale in which we are born. Is there a university nearby? Do people know what a college is? Think about that. Is education available where we were born? Is it prized? What about the assimilation of television? It's incredible how the hours each of us spends looking at television. And what are we seeing? We're seeing different locales. We're seeing different professions acted out in emotional drama. How is that affecting us? And if it affects us and we start to talk about it with our parents, what do they think? Maybe they squash all of those early dreams because something has awakened you in front of a television set or at a movie or a poster in town about the local university having a special program, and somehow it is interesting to you and you're only 13 years old. What is going to become of that thought in the next steps? The interrupted education sets off, ignites a pattern that's all too familiar. The person marries precipitously to get out of the home situation. It's an escape marriage. Usually to someone else with the same problems and concerns. And that marriage lasts about 2 years, and look at the problems. Well, it sounds like we might be getting off the track here of vocational profiling, but we're not. Vocational profiling uses all the faculties each of us has. You don't go to your job, if you're happy with it, with just a portion of who you are. It's all of you. And I'm building up to the framework of the solution that I found, discovered after 25 years of investigating and testing to solve this problem. How do we see the best profession in a horoscope for that individual? And I think that it's only reasonable that since so much of our being is modeled by the profession, the symbols of all that in astrology should be involved. What do you do for a living? Really says, who are you? Who are you in this society? How are we going to get along? What could we exchange together that will enrich both of us? Yeah, very powerful. Astrology is so helpful to the young person. In terms of vocation, just flashed through my mind, a father called me just recently about his young son, who was 9 years old. And that horoscope of his son showed to me the suggestion that the resourcefulness of the child was enormous. And I said to the father, you know, there's a suggestion here in your son's horoscope that if you gave him a tea bag, a popsicle stick, and he was out in the middle of the desert, he would build you a swimming pool. Now, I made my point. And the father said, you know, I understand that. He is that resourceful. And when I heard that word, I knew we would be home free. And it's fascinating that he then put the son on the phone to me. And I didn't know that was going to happen. It was a total surprise. He said, now will you talk to my son? And the boy got on, and he was articulate beyond his years. And I said to him, because of a key in the horoscope, if I suggested to you that you could be a very good teacher, what would you say to me? He said, I often feel that I could do a better job teaching than some of the teachers I have. Now, what more can you get from a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old? It was a beautiful answer, and we had a nice conversation. It wasn't giant specificity that was compelling to this young boy and to his father. It was getting in the ballpark, opening up doors of influence that could be followed up with creative parenting. I really enjoyed that call. I felt that I was eternally significant to this young boy. If you find someone who is in the wrong profession and they're very unhappy, we have to realize that they usually change jobs or are able to change jobs at ages 21, 35, 42, 50, and not much later. After 50, unfortunately, our society regards people as old. They're not fresh. The investment the corporation might make into the person is going to be short-lived before the person retires. It's not worth it. Youth wins. There are insurance programs, securities to worry about. It's complex. You have to stay with the status quo. But if something new and freshly dimensioned is brought up in the discussion about vocational profiling, this professional profiling consultation can position that new dimension as a hobby. Say you've always wanted to be in the theater, but you were forced to go into accounting to emulate your father in his firm. And there you are, a CPA, doing a great job, but totally frustrated. Maybe you could change your job to being a CPA for a theatrical organization. There are many people who are ushers and collecting tickets at the Metropolitan Opera, for example, as their night job, and fulfilling a great deal that they couldn't explore in order to be a singer themselves. We really have to think this dynamically to be helpful. Okay. Now, what do we look for in a horoscope? I'm going to show you now 9 points that are absolutely the key to everything, vocationally. And if you explore these 9 keys carefully, and I will show you many examples later, the art form of vocational profiling will be revealed. I have worked this out, and I feel gifted that I had the opportunity to do it. It was a breakthrough in astrology. And for a while, I thought, well, gee, I'm the only one who can do this. Because I invented it. And then I started seeing my students actually assiduously applying themselves and learning it themselves. And I can name you several students who are intimidating but have become so skilled. It's a joy to me. I call it the midheaven extension process, not a method. A method is very reliable, but a process is a way of thinking. The midheaven extension process, it's an extension from the midheaven out. It's a network process, a networking of personal resources related to fulfillment of personal needs. It's like a left fielder receiving a hit ball and throwing it to the shortstop, who immediately whips around and throws it to first base, but the runner has passed first and is on the way to second, and the first baseman throws it to the second baseman and they tag him out. This is left field, shortstop, first base, second base. That's a network of resources on a ball team. You with me? Let me show you how you get around the horoscope in this kind of network among the symbols. First of all, note the midheaven sign. The channeling starts with its ruler. If it is a double-bodied sign, like Gemini or Pisces especially, you will have the high potential of 2 or more professions. I have a Pisces midheaven, and I have had many professions. I've been an opera singer, an author, an astrologer, an analyst, etc. And so you get the feel from the ruling planet. The ruling planet starts the throw from left field into the shortstop, over the first to second base. Dispositor dynamics lead out to connections with other planets. I'm going to say something radical now. It is not the nature of an aspect, but I discovered it is just the simple observation of contact. Contact is more important than the aspect. Now, it is terribly difficult to train your mind in the beginning to not say, well, this is trine to that, or this is sextile to that, or this is a heavy square or quindicile to that. But in vocational profiling, in the midheaven extension process, you just say A is in contact with B and B in contact with C. Just as I showed you, hitting the ball to left field, and they throw it to the shortstop, to the first baseman, to the second baseman, and maybe to home because somebody was on second rounding third. Now, maybe not everybody understands the baseball analogy, but if you watch in basketball the play unfold among 5 people on the same team, what happens is they are throwing the ball within patterns, with the objective to become free and put it through the hoop. The midheaven extension process begins with the midheaven ruler, and then dispositor dynamics. If I have Neptune ruling my midheaven, and Neptune is in Virgo, the dispositor of Neptune is Mercury. You know that. And my Mercury could be in Capricorn, and the dispositor of that is Saturn. Saturn happens to be in Pisces. The dispositor is Neptune. And suddenly, the ball gets thrown back to this Neptune. And the Neptune gains dynamic stature. Got that? Midheaven, ruler, Neptune. Neptune disposited by Mercury, disposited by Saturn, Saturn disposited by Neptune. I've got a circuit there. Now, what does that circuit mean by, well, we'll get there. Contact is more important than aspect. Dispositor dynamics are what it's all about. Number 3, a planet that will be in contact with the midheaven or an aspect to it is going to be highly influential. So is the concept of mutual reception, somehow relating to the midheaven or its ruler. This is very strong. I have found that in the midheaven extension process, mutual reception is very, very important. It tells us a lot. It's a closed circuit. It's just 2 symbols working together, and they stop dead in their tracks because they are mutually attracted to each other. I went to an Italian restaurant last evening, and I had a white napkin put over my collar and down my front because I was afraid of mutual reception between my shirt and the spaghetti sauce. You know, one goes attracted to the other, and that's it. It can ruin your meal. Understand me. It is what resources are cooperating with each other, and where are they directing your analytical gaze? Naturally, a stellium increases focus on a particular house. Point number 5. I will show you a horoscope of someone with 6 planets in the 10th house. That isn't daunting. It is a very simple statement. The man is a businessman. But what kind of business? Aha, a modification by another player in that circuit will clarify that. The Oriental planet and the house it rules. Let me show you about the Oriental planet. It really is too bewildering to too many people, and I don't know why. Here's your east point of the ascendant. The sun is here. The Oriental planet, Orient means east, is the planet that will rise last before the sun does. So if I have a planet here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here, this is the Oriental planet. It's going to come up last before the sun follows. Simple as that. It's like a parade of Egyptian soldiers coming back to Thebes. And the pharaoh is going to be last to come into view. But next to last is going to be a very key person. It could be a high priest like Saturn. It could be a promoter like Mars, blasting out on his trumpet how the people should feel about the success of the military maneuver. What mood is the pharaoh in? You'll see several examples of Oriental planets' significance in the examples I'm going to share with you. Okay, so the Oriental planet and the house it rules. A peregrine planet that is not making a Ptolemaic aspect in the horoscope is very powerful because it tends to accentuate and run wild with the house or houses it rules. These things are really very, very simple. It's just digesting them in the beginning, and you'll realize you could be very comfortable with them all. A planet at the Aries point. The Aries point, as you know, is 29 mutable to 2 cardinal. And there are 4 areas in the horoscope that fit that. It brings things forward. I have a 0-0 Cancer ascendant. And that's an Aries point. And my emotions are constantly out on the table for everybody to see. I've had to learn to live with that. Conversely, some people are very, very guarded. You don't know their emotional state at all. And it also, Cancer carries with it the nurse, the carer, the physician, the indulgent person. And most of all, number 9, the high importance of the house occupied by the moon. And in many cases, this is the one time you would use the sign the moon is in. If you look at my horoscope and you see the Neptunian orientation of my midheaven, and you feel the emotional outreach of an Aries point ascendant in Cancer, and you see the moon in Leo, I don't have to tell you that anymore. You understand that need, drama, personal drama. And you see it in the 3rd house of communications. Are you able to say to me, Noel, the vocational profile in this horoscope is to be a dramatic communicator. Can you say that? You learn to have the confidence to do that. Now let me review them extremely quickly, and you'll see how much you've already learned. The midheaven extension process, the analytical orientation is, note the midheaven sign, its ruler starts the network of contact. Dispositor dynamics take you further. Aspect nature doesn't count. It's contact. There's the high influence of any planet on the midheaven or an aspect to it. Mutual reception is very, very powerful. A stellium is very strong, an accent. It tells you something. Open your ears and listen to it. The Oriental planet in the house it rules. A peregrine planet in the house it rules. Accentuation of the Aries point. And the extreme importance of the house occupied by the moon. Now notice, you understand that already. Let me give you just a few little keys that help. I'm going to go through the moon and the 12 houses very quickly. Feel them. Don't memorize them yet. Just feel them, and they'll be yours forever. Forever. When the moon is in the first house, it's going to accentuate the first house, which is the need to do your own thing. I can't tell you how important that is if you're sitting with somebody with the moon in the first house who hasn't been able to do his or her own thing, whatever that means to them. It's not for us to describe everything about the vocation. It's to allow the client to fill out with details that orientation which we soundly have deduced from the horoscope network of contact. Got it? If the moon is in the second house, it's sometimes working with shiny things or money. A cosmetologist. You know, I don't have to categorize all these things. It's also somebody who needs to be in front of people, to be on display. I have found that very, very frequently, news announcers on television have second house moons. Just keep that image in your mind. They need to be on display. Okay. The moon in the third house, I think, is the easiest of all because it's just communicator, communicator, communicator. It can be a salesperson. It can be an opera singer. It can be a writer. It's communication of all kinds. Now say you're sitting with someone in consultation and you're introducing vocational profiling and the person says to you, well, I'm a banker. And you see this moon heavy horoscope in the third house. And you've done your preparation and you realize there's something off. How do you find the communications on your job? Are they adequate in their opportunity for you to be expressive? Something like that. No, I'm in a back room and I'm in bad shape. I'm frustrated and I want to leave somewhere. I want to be more with the public. I want to be in the public eye. I want to be able to help people with counsel about what to do with the monies they want to borrow. I'm just making this up, but it just flows out of them when you hit that nerve within the network of resources. The moon in the 4th house very often is a person who really needs to work at home. It might be a single mother. But it is somebody who works in home, ideally, or sells homes. There's a spectrum here that gets refined by other contacts, as we will see. But it is really that categorically simplifiable. The moon in the 5th house, we have a situation where teaching must come to mind. Really, no doubt about it. And you don't have to be in front of a classroom to teach. You can teach by walking down the street to give a speech in Central Park. I mean, you are teaching in many, many different ways. Moon in the 6th is a workaholic, person who needs to work all the time. Nothing wrong with that. What is the person trying to prove by overwork? It also means social service potential. The moon in the 6th house is a symbol that leads us to say, how do you help others? You're going to hear that phrase again in a few moments. In the 7th, it's a public projection. In the 8th house vividly is a suggestion of alternative healing methodology. Psychiatrist, psychologist, X-ray technician, dental hygienist, might be 6th house, 8th. And you get the idea of helping other people with the values of themselves, since the 8th house is the 2nd of the 7th. The 9th house, obviously. This is a big spectrum. With the moon in the 9th house, you must start to think about law, philosophy, higher education, the travel industry, international diplomacy. All those things you know about the 9th house. Just file them away. And what's going to happen is, as you see the outreach networks forming in the horoscope for vocational profiling, you're going to see observations that fit. And as soon as you have that fit, all you need is the courage to believe it. And then I'm going to show you ways to present this. When the moon is in the 10th house, I would suggest to you that you have to realize that person has to take charge of everything. Be in charge of everything. That ingredient, that dimension has got to really come forward in the professional modality the person has chosen. Just has to be. If not, the person is frustrated. The person is unhappy with the job. I need a change. How many times have you heard that? Remember the two questions. What do you do for a living? Means what of you is being used profitably to be expressive and significant in your life? And the other question is, well, you know what it was, okay? All right. When the moon is in the 11th, it's usually working in a small group, like a clinic. In the 12th, it's in a big organization, like a management consultant, behind the scenes. The 8th house also is a consultancy house. And you get this feeling. How many people are not using their resources in their work? You see how vastly important this is? And it's, dare I say, more than doubly valid now in the modern era that women are expected to work. Our economy demands 2 incomes in a household to fulfill the family needs. There's that word again. How old is your client? Can they change? Do they want to? I could tell you stories. I could tell you stories. The one that's just fleeting across my mind now is this fellow, 29 years old, came to me. He's very secure in a marketing profession. In fact, his wife is too, and they work in the same firm. And I'm looking at a profile that is very 9th house orientated, very Jupiter, Neptune, very religious. And I said to him, there's a suggestion here in this horoscope about religion. It took courage for me to say that. I couched it in words that were not going to jeopardize my position in the consultation. Like, oh, he's a kook. No, I said it very gently. I was basically saying, tell me why I see this. And he said, I always wanted to be a priest. And I said, why can't you become a minister or a priest right now? Your wife has a secure job. Surely there's a college nearby where you live. And he's going, yes. I said, that offers theological training. Yes. And the bottom line was, do it. Isn't that fascinating? All right, we're going to look at some examples now, but I have to alert you to some shorthand that I created to make these explanations of these 9 points immediate. Dispositor notation. If we have the moon in Scorpio, see that dot, that period, that dot after it means disposited by Pluto. And maybe Pluto was in Virgo, dot, disposited by Mercury. And Mercury could be in Cancer, dot, disposited by the moon. Or if Mercury is in Virgo, that asterisk means final dispositor. Clear? Very simple. Just get used to the shorthand. It's fun. You can do it very quickly. Pop, 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 pop. Some vocational profilings you can do in 15 seconds. Some require 5-6 minutes of looking, and then sleeping on it, waking up, and you'll have the solution the next morning. Enormous practice is required. Mutual reception, I like that. I don't know what those symbols are, greater than, less than, but they link them together. Aries point, I use a carat, and for Oriental, just the letter E. Now, all of this that I've been discussing with you practically all of this, is in my book, Vocations. And there are 68 cases for practice in that book, Vocations. I urge you to have that nifty book. Without it, you're just going to be fooling around for a couple of days, and you're going to forget your orientation to learn the most important service astrology can give another human being. I promise you that. There are some strong keys that, out of experience, stick out in prominence. The emphasis of the sign Aquarius by the moon, for example, or by Uranus, linked somehow to the 6th house, always seems to suggest social services. Especially in this era in which we live, everybody's, by leaps and bounds, trying to help other people. It's even governmentally overextended by the United States. But individuals want to give the helping hand to others. And there are many ways that this takes place. But social services is key. This key is so strong that if you see it, and in your early days of practicing vocational profiling, you don't quite know what to do with it, just say to your client, how do you help people? And listen creatively. How do you help people? Any contact with Saturn is going to suggest an administration dimension. Say the moon rules the 12th and is squared, in contact with, see, I made that mistake, is in contact with Saturn. Moon rules the 12th and is in contact with Saturn. You're starting to think about administration of a large organization, behind the scenes usually, or a hospital, especially if the 8th house of alternative healing methodology is involved. It's creeping up on you now, isn't it, how this synthesis works. Remember, the ball is hit to the left field. That comes right out of the midheaven. The left fielder takes it over here to the shortstop, who takes it over here to the first baseman, who throws it back to the second baseman, and we have a score. Clear? Now let's look at some very simple examples to begin with, and we're going to end up with some real sophistication. All right, this is a man's horoscope with a Libra midheaven. Now immediately as I say that, your mind says Venus, the ruler of the midheaven. Where is Venus? Venus is in contact with the midheaven. Notice, it's right here. It's on that axis. And it's also in contact with Neptune. So the two significators, Venus and Neptune, which is art, artistry, aesthetics, there is no doubt about it, are in contact with the midheaven ruled by Venus. And notice that we can go to the moon in the 2nd house, needing to be in front of other people as an aesthetic communicator. Notice that Neptune rules the 3rd, is the dispositor of the moon. Moon, Pisces, disposited by Neptune with Venus, related to the midheaven. See how that shorthand comes in handy? There it is. This man has to be an artistic communicator. His name was Enrico Caruso. There's no doubt about it. Case is finished. Sure, Venus rules the fifth. Sure, if Enrico Caruso had lived longer and retired, he would have become a teacher of singing. Clear? Here we have a male with a Sagittarian midheaven. Now this Sagittarian midheaven keys Jupiter. So our first stop here, at the crack of the bat, boom, the ball goes to Jupiter. That Jupiter is disposited by, see that? Jupiter disposited by Neptune over here. And Neptune is with Venus. Now what did we just find in Enrico Caruso's horoscope was that the combination of Neptune and Venus is aesthetics, art, artistry. There's no doubt about it. Artistry. And I said to this man, the definite suggestions in this horoscope are for art, for artistry. And he said, well, I'm a painter and I'm a very specialized photographer. And then I said, but there's more. Because notice how the Neptune and Venus are disposited by Pluto. See that? Pluto rules Scorpio. Here's Pluto. And Pluto rules the ninth, where we have Sun and Mercury. I said, you should be teaching this at a university. How do you feel about that? He said, I work for the university and I've made a presentation to them for this specialized photography work as a curriculum to be included someday in the future. I said, I'd press for that. I think he'd be very fulfilled. Notice how the moon is in the seventh. He's in the public eye doing his work, his seminars. He takes pictures of people all the time. He's a very important three-dimensional photographer. And notice how many films are coming out in 3D now. And he's going to have a big career soonish, which is a little too late for him, he thinks. But anyhow, that's the kind of discussion you get into. But he happens to be in the right profession. He's not earning the $1 million he wants, but he may. Is that clear? Please tell me. Talk to me on the DVD machine. Okay. Now this horoscope, Pisces midheaven. Where is Neptune? Here is Neptune here. And lo and behold, Neptune is at the Aries point. You see that? 0, 0 Libra. Now that Neptune is also in touch with the midheaven. See that? It's the dispositor of the moon. And the moon is in contact with Neptune. It's a quindicile. Now what is that starting to tell us? It's starting to tell us again about aesthetics. The moon ruling the ascendant and being involved here this way is a statement of ego. He is a soloistic performer in a Neptune industry. It's just arts, television, film. Sure, there are backup ideas here with 3 planets and the nodal axis in Leo, with the sun being the final dispositor, ruling the third, which is communication, holding the idealization conjunction of Mercury and Venus And so what we have, let's review. We have aesthetics, soloistic performance, drama, television, movies, communicator. Now, what more do you want? Huh? Isn't that hot? That's beautiful. And that's the horoscope of Robert De Niro. I hope I'm not going too fast. Mercury rules the midheaven of this lady's horoscope. So midheaven, disposited by Mercury, ruler of the 8th, and Peregrine. That's why we put the oval around it. So it's always, we look at Mercury, we know it's going to go wild in terms of the 8th house. Her career, Mercury rules the 10th and the 8th. Alternative healing methodologies. And when we have Uranus there, we can easily think of possibly astrology. But let's pause for a moment and check this Mercury out further. Mercury is disposited by Pluto, because Pluto rules Scorpio, holding the planet Mercury. And that Pluto, here, in Leo, happens to be in mutual reception with the Sun. Now, the Sun rules Leo in the 9th. And so we can start to say, here is someone involved with alternative healing methodologies, possibly astrology, working with publishing as well, because of the 9th house. It all starts to fit. You feel it like a kaleidoscope when we were kids, remember? You turn that around in your eye, saw all those shapes and colors, and then suddenly there was a design that was very pleasing. The Neptune factor is with the moon. This is the horoscope of someone who needs to be in the healing methodologies, in publishing as well, sharing those ideas with the world. This is the astrologer Erin Sullivan. This is her horoscope. There's much more we can say, but we have to begin slowly. She was an editor in a large publishing house in London. She is an astrologer and prominent author. All very clear, isn't it? Notice that this Uranus factor here rules the 3rd. And this is the link between writing and other healing methodologies, alternative healing methodologies. Learn to say that phrase, alternative healing methodologies. It takes in a tremendous compass of vocational self-application. This horoscope has a Sagittarian midheaven, and that Sagittarian midheaven keys Jupiter. Now Jupiter is quintile, see that? That's creativity, quintile to Mercury. So Jupiter is in touch with Mercury. In touch means a hyphen. And that Mercury is powerfully in touch on an angle, which makes everything stronger, with the moon in the 7th. And this is a public projection of communication. Mercury rules the third, on an angle, in communications, to the public. We also see that Mars is in touch with Uranus. See that? And anytime you have that, Mars in touch with Uranus, no matter what it is, you have to think of technology. You have to think of invention. And in the old days, it was the man with the big inventive idea, or the woman. Nowadays, it's technology often plays a role in the vocational choice. So what do we have? We have Jupiter here on the third, disposited by Mercury, Mercury in touch with the moon. We have communications to the public with a dose of technology. That's all you need to say to this young man at age 28 named Alexander Graham Bell. And he says, I have invented something called the telephone. And the rest is history. He was in the right profession. A very interesting advanced detail here is that he had a day job where he worked in a school for the deaf. And we know symbolically in astrology that Saturn is deafness. And his wife was deaf. And suddenly the beautiful motivations for discovering the telephone to help people talk with each other and be heard comes into your aesthetic focus as an astrologer. All right, I want to hold these examples for another session a little bit later, and I want to give you some practical tips for how to present this to a client as you are learning and practicing. I remember vividly when all of this midheaven extension process came together, coalesced in my awareness. It was some years ago, a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago. And I'd been working on it for about 4 or 5 years before that. And I was sitting in Florida in a motel seeing clients. And this lady was coming in to see me, and I knew from the routings of her significators that she had to be in real estate. She came in and sat down, and I said, please tell me you're in real estate. Just right off the bat. She said, I am. Well, after that, I could do no wrong. But I had to do all right thereafter with what finally came together in my mind. And it was from then on that I felt daily more and more confidence with the midheaven extension process. And as I pondered about how a beginner with the process practices, I realized the fear that I had, that you will have, in introducing it into your consultation dialogue. Let me give you a way to do that, and you won't be afraid. What I had done for many clients up to that point was I would study the horoscope for vocational profiling, and then I would write up in the right corner of the horoscope real estate or teaching. For instance, if the moon is oriental, the probability is 120% that the person is in teaching of some kind. We'll see an example of that or two soon. And I would write that down. And in the course of discussion, I would say to the person, what do you do for a living? There's that question again. And the person would say, well, I'm a teacher. And then I would turn my paper around, the horoscope, and I would say, I had that written down here before you came in. Now that makes you feel pretty good, and it makes your client feel pretty good. If he said, I'm in banking, my eyes would immediately try to make adjustments. And if I couldn't, I would say, but you know, there's a suggestion here that that might not be the best vocation for you. And he would say, it certainly isn't. I'm desperately unhappy in my job. I said, well, isn't there something in your job that could put you in a teaching mode, like recruits to the bank and instructing them somehow? He said, I would love that. I said, I know you would. But here you are now, 35. Are you, and I know that transcending Saturn is squaring its own natal position, and I see this SP moon and a couple solar arcs, and I'm loaded for bear. And I say, are you ready to try to make a change? He said, yes, that's why I'm here to see you. And I said, what can you do to change into a modality of teaching others? That's how the conversations go. So what I want to suggest to you is get the book, Vocations, and make the notations just as we've done in these example charts, and there are a few more to come. Make a decision, and don't be afraid if you're right or wrong. And write it on the upper corner edge of the horoscope, and ask the question, what do you do for a living? If the person answers you as what you have written, turn the paper around, and you're made in the shade. It's wonderful. This is how you gain confidence. And you will become more accurate, more correct, dare I say, the more you practice. And on my website, noeltil.com, every Wednesday or Thursday for the last 3 or 4 years, we have exercises in vocational profiling. I present 2 example data. You do the work. I edit it on Friday morning, and we see who is learning and who's not. And it's fascinating to see the growth in people who assiduously apply themselves to practicing every day. I cannot look at a horoscope without doing vocational profiling. No horoscope should be looked at without doing vocational profiling because of its great importance. The fact that so many people are dissatisfied with their work and how it affects the rest of their life and generations to come therefrom. What do you do for a living? Don't ever forget the power of that question. All right, more examples? All right, this horoscope is a male horoscope. Notice that Sagittarius is on the midheaven. Now, what goes through your mind first? First, publishing, religion, academia, travel, import-export, distance, law. All right. Jupiter then is going to be the key for those things. That's how do we refine it? How do we focus it down? We find Jupiter here in the 5th. Notice that Jupiter also rules Sagittarius on the 9th. Publishing, law, all those things are in your mind. That Jupiter is in contact with the moon. See that? Jupiter, moon. Very, very strong. This is a first house moon. This is a do-your-own-thing position. Very powerful. Notice that it's in touch with Uranus, which makes it very special. It's infused with things Uranian. Dare we say astrology? Quite possibly. But we don't have to go that far. We just know that this man is probably president of his own firm. Notice that Saturn here is the final dispositor. You see that? Being in its own sign. He's the leader. He's the president of something to do with things Jupiterian. And publishing is probably the best bet because the administration factor of Saturn is in touch with Mercury, and Mercury rules the 3rd, writing. This happens to be the president of a publishing company. And he's just gotten around, very late in his life, to writing a few books of his own. I know him well, and I had to laugh when he told me that. But he's near 80, and he's very, very successful as an administrative leader in the publishing field in terms of the occult and astrology. See? Jupiter, all those things in your mind, involved with the moon in the 1st house. Saturn, final dispositor, is powerful, angular, near the midheaven, in touch with Mercury, Mercury ruler of the 3rd. So you know it's communications and it's specialized. Now this lady has a Sagittarian midheaven as well, so the same thing is going to go through your mind. And notice how the Jupiter is here, in the 3rd, same thing is going to go through your mind with Saturn. So it's administrative power in terms of communications, publishing. Notice how that Pluto, ruler of the 9th, you're going to check out publishing, huh? Pluto is in touch with Mercury, ruler of the 8th, alternative healing methodologies. Notice how the moon is in position to be in touch with the midheaven, with Uranus, something very special or esoteric, maybe astrology. So this female is in publishing, communications, probably astrology, something that is alternatively helpful and different. Should be, she is, she's the business manager of the corporation headed by our last example, and the similarities between the two are extraordinary. They're both in the same firm, and they read absolutely like mirror images of one another. Now we have an Aquarian midheaven, which keys Uranus, which is in touch with the moon, which is the final dispositor of the horoscope ruling the 3rd. Saturn is oriental. You see that? Saturn will rise last before the sun does. Saturn rules the ninth. So again, we have avant-garde publishing, communication, probably astrology, and that's all you need to say. This person is not in banking. This person is not in professional sports. This person is not a cook. This person is involved with publishing. This is the son of these two people that we've just gone through, and is now the business manager as well of the publishing corporation. So here are three people in the same profession, in the same corporation. Man, I get excited about this, and I know it so well, but my goodness, nature is revealing things to us. This lady has an Aquarian midheaven, keyed by Uranus. I'm going just a wee bit faster now. And that Uranus is involved with Mercury, its dispositor. And Mercury is disposited by Jupiter, see? So they are in mutual reception. Mercury in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Virgo. And Jupiter rules the eighth, which holds the moon in Sagittarius. This is alternative healing methodologies. This is a very strong focus here for the moon that needs to have opinions respected. Got it? Is that clear? I hope so. Because this person should be working in a publishing company, ideas, publishing, probably on the avant-garde level, in alternative healing methodologies. She has a PhD in psychology and is an employee of the family that owns the corporation you've just seen. So there are four people involved in the same corporation, in the same pursuit vocationally that we've just analyzed. Remember the man I told you had 6 planets in the 10th house? Here he is. 6 planets in the 10th house. You look at that and you say, oh my, what do I do? Well, let's very calmly find the dispositor of the midheaven. Venus is in this collective right here with Saturn, which is going to be an administrative emphasis point. Notice how Jupiter is in touch with Uranus. Could it very well be a specialized business, maybe astrology? Because that Venus is in touch with, see, Mars. Uranus is the dispositor of Mars. So we could do it this way too. He's the president of his own firm. Obviously, he needs to be with the sun on the midheaven. And so we have Venus, ruler of the midheaven, administratively ensconced with Saturn, involved with Mars, disposited by Uranus, with Jupiter. And what we get is a statement of avant-garde publishing. This Mars factor rules the ninth. It is really very strong. The moon is in the first house, a do-your-own-thing position. And he's one of the biggest publishers in the world with regard to astrology, programs, software. Notice that Mars and Uranus are squared or in touch with each other. which is technology. This is Claude Weiss of Astrodata in Switzerland. Fascinating, huh? This is the horoscope of Nelson Mandela. Notice that Mercury is the ruler of the midheaven, and that Mercury is with Saturn, disposited by the Sun, disposited by the Moon, disposited by Pluto. See if you can follow that. Mercury and Saturn, you feel administration, disposited by the Sun, ruler of the ninth, so you know there's probably something about law or publishing or other things that we talked about. And that Sun is disposited by the Moon. That Moon is in Scorpio, disposited by Pluto. And that is very important because Pluto is Oriental. You see, if you bring this all the way around here, Pluto will be the last planet to go into rising position before the Sun does. Now, Pluto Oriental, as you will read in the book, Vocations, suggests gaining prestige by being with important people. A lot of people need to do that. And Nelson Mandela certainly did. And it paid off for him. He knows every president of every country in the world, probably, and has become himself very famous. But notice this Uranus final dispositor here in Aquarius. How do you help people, Mr. Mandela? There's your answer. Fascinating, isn't it? You're not going to look at this and see a president of the South Africa, the country of South Africa. You're going to see a lawyer. He was a lawyer. You're going to see someone who is working behind the scenes powerfully to do good for people. There's more. My job today is to share with you a part of a miracle that has been so long neglected in our learning of astrology. This works. It's not going to work for you overnight, but if you practice carefully, read the book Vocations, check all the horoscopes you have, detect vocational rootings, you'll come up with your part of the art. I wrote down here the words public defender. I thought that was a beautiful synthesis of his being a lawyer, being administratively involved with the law, and being humanistically involved with helping people. He sacrificed all those years in jail, if you want, as a public defender, emerged into fame. A professional athlete, and this is Michael Jordan, seems to refer heavily to the fifth house. Uranus rules his midheaven and is in the fifth house with Pluto. This is like a building up of muscle. You just can feel it. The Jupiter augments this. This is a contact from Jupiter. It's a quindicile with Uranus. The Sun is involved. Saturn and Mars is always a very difficult combination. And I can't make too much of that here. But everything else comes down to the rulers and occupancy of the fifth house. You could say that Saturn is oriental, rising before the sun does, and that Saturn in touch with Mars in Leo gives you a real blast of stick-to-it, hyper-deterministic energy, as it does in life for anybody. Mars-Saturn is somebody gets things done. This is Steffi Graf, the champion tennis player. Notice that moon is oriental. You see that? The moon is risen just before the sun does. And that means teacher. But before she's a teacher, notice this combination of stuff here in the fifth house. These resources, again, Pluto, Uranus, Jupiter, very, very powerful. Mercury is the final dispositor. See it in Gemini? Now, if I were sitting with Steffi Graf, I would say, well, I know you were an athlete and your horoscope suggests that sports play a very important part in your life. But tell me, please, what else is there? The horoscope suggests teaching, which is a conversion of the fifth house modality, and the Mercury ruling the fifth being the final dispositor. Now, it is obvious to me, because of all the years and years of practice I've had, that sings a powerful song for Steffi Graf. Would you believe that she and Andre Agassi, her husband, just recently bought a huge building and converted it into a school, a very specialized private school? There's more and more to that story. That moon is peregrine and oriental and very powerful. And you might say, well, Steffi Graf doesn't appear to have much personality when she's interviewed on television and stuff. Well, there's a tightness there, yes. Saturn is conjunct Venus. But the professional outlet is a way to overcompensate. This is how her life becomes affected. We have a few more examples to do, and we'll get to them in a minute. The midheaven extension process is so exciting. We have to know when to stop. Let me explain that. In my training of people, and you will see it copiously represented in the book Vocations, I insist that you write down the word stop, all capital letters, as soon as the deductions coalesce in your mind. Now, this is terribly important because you can go nuts with variables and potentials and, well, this goes this way, it goes that way. Take a chance. Take a stand. You have to be able to take a stand to find out the right way. Your brain is going to remember these routings, and the brain will respond to brevity. And you have to be able to say, that's where I stop my thinking. Summarize that in 2 sentences, or 1, or 3 words, and hope. And that's how you learn. Without the stop, you have no discipline. Without discipline, you don't gain confidence. Okay? It's terribly important or you're going to just go crazy. Let's take a look at just a few more closing examples. This is a lady's horoscope with the moon as the ruler of the midheaven. Don't get upset if it's 29, Cancer 27. It's still Cancer. The moon rules that. Where's the moon? The moon is here with Mercury, in touch with that. But my goodness, the moon is Oriental. What does that tell you? Teacher. That's the first modality that I want to pursue. That moon in Aquarius is a teacher of maybe a specialization. So we find that Uranus is the dispositor of the moon, and we check it out. And it's with Jupiter. So Jupiter is taking an educative overtone so that it fits the mix. And that Venus is over here, and I don't know, but I just seem to lose touch with it after that point. But what I'm keen on, in other words, the process doesn't want to go further. The process wants to stop here with a Cancer, midheaven, moon, Oriental, with Mercury. And Mercury also ruling the 9th. We know it's a teacher. How does the 9th house come in? It can be a teacher on an academic level that is in college, for example, higher academia. Or it could be foreign languages. So we check the fact that Uranus disposits the moon. Mercury is with Jupiter, ruler of the 3rd, the Mercury. So the 3rd, 9th axis is involved. Let's start over. The moon rules the midheaven. There it is. It's Oriental. It's a teacher. Disposited by Uranus with Jupiter. Specialized, Jupiter, 3rd, communications. Mercury here with the moon, 9th. This person teaches foreign languages. A perfect profession for her. This is an example of a trap that we can easily fall into when we have Neptune strongly configured as it is here at the midheaven and in relationship with Jupiter. Immediately, this starts to talk about aesthetics, philosophy, religion, spirit. But you're going to see that that's not the case. Let's follow Jupiter a different way first. Jupiter is the ruler of the midheaven. Jupiter here is disposited by Mars, which is powerful in its peregrination, and it rules the 2nd house. We have to remember that when a planet symbol is within 2 to 3, maybe 4 degrees of the next house, it is rushing to get into that house. And that is a pleasant thought. It's rushing to be significant. And the Jupiter factor, rushing to be in the 2nd, ruled by Mars, brings finance to mind. At the same time, this situation is complemented by the fact that Venus is peregrine as well. And Venus rules the 8th, which is the 2nd of the 7th. So the financial axis, 2 to 8, is strongly articulated. Clear? And the Neptune factor is Oriental. Now, how do we put that together? I said to this young man, the horoscope suggests that finance and money are extremely important. He said, yes, I'm a broker with a very big firm, financial. And I said, but there's a dimension of spirit here that is hard to assimilate. And we talked about that a little bit. It turns out he has a degree as well in philosophy. But he chose the money routing. And in discussion, I said to him with Neptune Oriental, which means visions of idealism for the world, I said, you need to be in a position with your financial management acumen to do good for the world. And there was silence in that consultation as his self-image changed. That's how effective this can be. He agreed. It all of a sudden gave significance to what he was doing. He could be a financial counselor at the UN on the good ship Hope. I mean, I gave him examples. And it took care of all that symbology. But if you said you should be a priest, you wouldn't have had enough experience to say that. And it's not so. He's a financial powerhouse, multilingual, ready to address the world to make it better. Deductions like that deserve applause. You know what I'm saying? Wow. The midheaven process, midheaven extension process has given me so much joy in terms of helping others find themselves. This last example is a friend of mine. He became a friend. His name is Swami Mahadevananda. And Swami has said I could use his horoscope. What we have is a midheaven in Cancer, disposited by the moon in Sagittarius, peregrine. You know that means have your opinions respected. Obsessive need, especially in the third house of communications. Disposited by Jupiter, which is disposited by Mars, which is disposited by Saturn. And that Saturn is disposited by Venus, which is disposited by Mercury. And when you say, when is this going to stop? And it comes to the final dispositor, Mercury, ruler of the 9th. Swami, were you a lawyer? Yes, I was, in Rome. And now he's a religious leader throughout the world. Notice how that Mercury, ruler of the 9th, is with Neptune. Now there's a shorter way to do that with experience. You go through it the long way. You see the key stuff and you can start there. You can say the moon rules Cancer on the midheaven. Opinionation, communication, it's got to have a lot to say. And so you immediately jump to Mercury because you see it's the final dispositor. And it's with Neptune. And you say, well, how does that work in with the accentuation of the 9th house? Well, that is law and it's internationalism at the same time. So let me take you through yet again. The moon rules the midheaven, is peregrine, communicating in the 3rd house, desperately needing opinions respected. Disposited by Jupiter, disposited by Mars. That Mars is disposited by Saturn. All his faculties here of energy, administration. Saturn is disposited by Venus here. The idealism with Venus and the Sun and Neptune. It starts to hint at spirit. And that Venus is disposited by Mercury, ruler of the ninth. And by that time, you're feeling the spirit. You're feeling religion. You're feeling this. And that is who this man is. He happened to have been a lawyer, which fits as well. But now he's a religious leader. Fascinating. And as we close, I want you to go through with me again the 9 keys, because these 9 points are all that I used in the presentation on this DVD. We note the midheaven sign, and the channeling starts with its ruler. We use dispositor dynamics to lead to connections. Remember the baseball analogy. The ball is hit to left field, who might throw it to the shortstop, who might throw it to the first baseman, who might throw it home, or might throw it to the second baseman. There's a network of inclinations and talents. Dispositor dynamics shows that network. Contact is more important in this process than the nature of an aspect or a sign. There's a high influence given to a planet on an angle, especially the midheaven. Mutual reception that usually relates to the midheaven as well, or its ruler, will be very strong. This is where your emphasis goes, these points. A stellium increases focus on a particular house, of course. The oriental planet, very, very powerful. And the house or houses it rules. A peregrine planet, similarly. A planet at the Aries point. And the extremely high importance of the house occupied by the moon. And we went through all 12. And the moon sign. There's simply no doubt about it. So when somebody says to you, what do you do for a living? Yes, I'm using my planets to the best advantage I can, as suggested in my horoscope. Thank you.